I have built a studio in a caravan. Right, this was something that I did over the course of this year, January, February. I'd actually taken it, so I'd gone away during the week, and I was going to record the second part in my caravan away, which is this. So it would have been the same, but yeah, just to see how it goes, I suppose. But I ended up getting sick. But yeah, so one thing that I notice with new producers and new engineers when they're creating their own space at home is not necessarily knowing where to begin. That was something that I found when I started, and then I actually watched one of your seminars about room acoustics and how to soundproof your room. But I wanted to, see if you were able to, I suppose, sum it up or touch on some key points in which new people who are literally thinking today, all right, I'm gonna treat my room and try and really go for this dream that I've got. What advice or where would they begin? I suppose where would they begin in creating this kind of space?
Well, I think that's probably the most overlooked part for beginners, in that they think that the equipment is more important, and it is, but you can't mix it if you can't hear it. So you have to really tune your space if possible. And it's not possible for a lot of people because the just the conditions that they start in. But as soon as you can, you should add some room treatment. It doesn't cost that much. There are several ways to do it. Probably the easiest way these days is to go to one of the companies that supply acoustic materials, Prime Acoustic, GIK Acoustics. There's plenty of them, and usually they'll help you. They'll have starter kits that can get you going. The other way you can do it is you can actually do it yourself, and that just requires knowing how to swing a hammer for the most part, and then obtaining materials. But the whole thing you're trying to do, this is an old concept actually, and it's whenever I have a real room designer on my podcast, for instance, they always take me to task for this, for for espousing things that are kind of old, and of course they moved on to new techniques, but the way that's tried and true and it really works and it's easy is an RFZ, a reflection-free zone. Reflection-free zone means that on the left and the right of you, you make absorptive, you make it soft, and ideally on top of you. That's kind of the key. If you can make it like a soft top and on the sides, and then put something behind you, a bookcase works really well because that's a combination of diffusion and absorption. And if you can do that, it will sound a whole lot better. Now, there are ways, and the next question is, how many panels do I need? And usually it's 2 on a side and 1 on top. And what I have behind me here is I have a couple of sound panels. Let's see, there's 4 others. There's a lot of others, but mostly what I have are ASC tube traps, which I bought 20 years ago. And I bought them particularly because I was moving studios all the time. I wanted a portable solution. And these are on stands. They're really easy. They're expensive, but that being said, I've had them for 20 years through multiple studios, so it certainly served me well. But the whole thing, it doesn't change. It doesn't matter what material you use. It's still using the RFZ, reflection-free zone concept. You do that, it will sound pretty good.
Would you say what are your views on the cheap acoustic foam that you can buy? It's basically everywhere. You can buy it from eBay, really cheap. I noticed that's something that producers tend to go for first. and just putting, I suppose blue tacking them, or with a thumbnail or something to their walls, thinking that it might actually help with, I suppose, sound isolation, which is different to acoustic treatment, which is another thing that young producers and engineers kind of don't distinguish the two. They always think that it's sound isolation and acoustic treatment are the same, and so but yeah, so that they genuinely go for those acoustic foams. I mean, would you? What are your opinion? What's your opinion on that, as opposed to spending a little bit more cash and getting, say, these compressed fiberglass?
Well, it's better than nothing, but not much. One of the problems with acoustic foam is it's very limited in bandwidth, so it's only 2K and above. And most of the problems that you have in a room are below that, so it doesn't fix as much as you would hope it would. It's still useful, but it's not as useful as many people think. The other problem is if you don't get the right stuff, it's not flame retardant sometimes as well, so somewhat of a fire hazard. So you have to be careful with that. But there's lots of materials that people think will help with that. Carpet is another one. I don't know where this ever started, but egg crates.
Yeah, right.
I don't know where that.
Yeah,
There's zero help. A little bit
right.
of
Yeah,
a diffusion maybe, but
yeah,
when it comes down to it, it's easier to just get some panels. There's lots of and build it yourself. Like you said, compressed fiberglass, which is Owens Corning 703. That's not used as much anymore because it gets in your lungs. It's hard to work with because as soon as you work with it, you'll find you're itchy and it's difficult. So now we go to either rock wool. Sometimes it's hard to find. There's another. It's called by Centerteed. It's Safe and Sound, and what that is believe it or not, recycled blue jeans,
yeah. Right.
and
Okay.
that works incredibly well.
Yeah. So is it just like compressed jeans, basically, to as compressed as they can be, or how is it recycled?
No, it's chopped up. It looks like a fiber almost.
Okay. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
you wouldn't know it's blue jeans
Yeah. Right.
if
Yeah.
someone wouldn't tell you that's what
Yeah.
it is.
So yeah, I was going to say that I had a cousin who lived up in Chile, which is where I'm from, and he had spent the last year saving up egg cartons to soundproof his whole bedroom. He'd got about halfway there, and he just had his wall covered. He'd saved them, um, and yeah, unfortunately, I said, look, I don't think that's going to do much. But he ended up leaving them. He ended up finishing it. It was weird, strange, but very amusing. Yeah, so it's definitely something that I see a lot of young musicians and producers doing, is treating the wrong aspects of their room. I notice a lot as well with like lack of attention to bass. Uh, you either notice a lot of mixes with too much bass, which I suppose would imply that their room isn't resonating bass, or the opposite. How would how would you go about fixing that, or I suppose thinking about how to counter those issues that they might come across with bass in particular?
Yeah, that's a hard one. And again, I'm not a studio designer. I know how to fix them up so they sound pretty good, but I'm not a designer. I wouldn't sit down and design a room, but I know a lot of the great ones, and I know how they do it. And now they could actually hear a room before it's built.
Yeah,
You know,
okay. Yeah, yeah,
they
yeah,
have
right.
those tools that they can hear what it sounds like. But all that being said, there's still a certain amount of experimentation, even when it's finished from the best designers. They
Yeah,
still have to go in, and it takes them a week to move things around until they get it just right.
yeah,
So, this is one of those things where there's an art to it, and there's also a craft. The craft only goes so far, then the art takes over. That being said, to answer your question, there's the current corners are always a problem, and that's where you get your bass buildup, and that's where you get bad reflections. It's one of the problems where I see musicians who are just putting a studio in their home where they'll put it in a corner, or they'll put
Yeah.
one of their speakers in a corner, and as a result, there's a lot of low end that's happening there, which then means that you're going to be bass light when you actually send the mix out.
Yeah.
So you have to treat those corners, and you treat those corners with something that's really soft. And again, this thing is, when it comes to bass traps, the easiest thing is to buy them,
Right.
because
Yeah.
you're getting something that's going to work for
Yes.
sure. If you try to build it yourself, you can, but it takes a lot more experimentation. Those things are harder to do yourself. There's something, gee, I can't think of the name of it. Anyway, it's a way that you just take, for instance, if you had 703, you cut it where you have four pieces and you have four angles, and you basically just load up the corner with
Yeah. Right.
those. And at
Okay.
a certain point, you find that, oh, this is perfect. I have just enough, but it's, experimental for the most part. So it's easier to buy a number of them. Remember, there's a lot of corners. Everybody thinks, well, there's four corners in a room, but there's more than that, because your corners actually are where the wall meets the floor.
Yeah.
That's a corner.
Yeah.
Wall meets the ceiling. So you have plenty of other corners in
Yeah.
there.
It's definitely something people don't think about when doing. They think corners are just the actual corner in a room, and they don't realize that there's other corners that are made as well, when you add furniture as well, all that kind of stuff. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's in regards to choosing where to actually allocate your budget when you are, um, I suppose, creating your own space. Would you lean towards spending that money in the acoustic treatment as opposed to buying, the best gear, or would you lean back, on the gear and
Yeah, it depends on your budget, but acoustic treatment isn't as expensive as, you know, everyone thinks. So but again, if $1,000 is expensive to you, then then you really have to compromise. But generally, the cost of a reasonable preamp will get you some reasonable acoustic treatment. So it's not all that super expensive when it's all said and done. If the shipping might cost you more than you'd think, that's you pay X amount of dollars in the shipping, you'll be surprised how much it is. But that being
yeah,
said, it's still not that much.
well, that's right. Yeah, it's something that I didn't realize when I was starting. Was I always thought it was expensive. It was also, I suppose, when I started as well. It was, eBay wasn't huge. All these, yeah, Amazon, all this stuff wasn't huge back when I started. It's a lot easier now to access some really good, stuff, because of the internet, which I find really cool.